Well, hello there and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor. I have no idea if I'm on camera because we're trying something a little different today. Our guest on the show is Derek Künsken. English speaking folks probably pronounce it Künsken, but I'm German and he's of German heritage, so I pronounce him with the umlaut. Derek is a former molecular biologist, I guess like fellow Canadian Peter Watts. He's the author of the Quantum Evolution Trilogy. The third part, Quantum War, is out on the 12th. Oh, I see myself now. I think I'm behind the camera. Oh, now the camera looks at me straight in the eye. Thank you. Now, out right now is The House of Styx. We'll talk about all these books. The House of Styx is a prequel to this epic quantum evolution saga. And I am here in a little overgrown with plants, I guess, container vessel. And the stories or the universe that Derek created is full of space travel and wormholes. So it was only fitting that we created a little wormhole to go to the main show because you probably wondered if you're watching this on YouTube, what the hell is going on? There's absolutely no guest here. Um, let's try to see if there are actually guests. I'm going to walk through the wormhole. Camera, I'm going to walk very slowly so you can follow me. So let's look around a little bit, and I'll mention a little bit later because obviously our set will stay around. You can visit it. You can check out Derek's work. There's a lot of awesome posters on the wall, including the Chinese edition of some books. I think a Japanese edition as well. But I digress. Let's walk through the wormhole and get to the show, shall we? Because we're live. God, I'm a very unprofessional host. I'm late to my own show. Well, here's a big freighter hovering. There's other wormholes. Oh boy, and there's strange plants here on the ground level. A lot of books on the ground. Some of these plants look a little bit angry. We'll talk about what that has to do. Of course, our set, as always, is an interpretation of our main set builder Ruby, but this time also of Isabel. Isabel and Ruby built this set jointly together, and here we are. We are here on the set. Wow, what a big crowd! Unbelievable. I can't even get to my own chair over there. Let's see. I'm gonna cheat and just teleport to my own chair. And here is Derek Künsken. Derek Künsken is right here. Hello, Derek. How are you?
Hey, it's nice to meet you, and I love what you've done with the place.
Isn't this amazing? And you actually made a comment on Twitter. I didn't even think about it. You said that this is basically like a little bit like fan art. I mean, what we're doing, we're reading the work and then we're interpreting it. There's no pictures in your books, so we have to envision the protagonists and the world. And so this is sort of the outcome. The only difference between fan art and not to sound elitist or anything. Our place will stick around. You can actually be inside of it.
It is
Yes.
it is pretty darn cool. I've only had a couple of people ever draw anything in my novels, and so to have posters on the wall and people walking around as the characters in my books is honestly a huge thrill. Thank you.
We should cam before we get into the conversation. Let's cam towards the audience because we do have the main protagonist, Belisarius Arjona, is right there on the side. And we have Duggan 12, a puppet archbishop, I guess. Nobody knows what I'm talking about, but you will. And there is Manfred Gates in disguise. Manfred Gates is also a puppet. Puppets are genetically engineered beings in your saga, but the Manfred Gates here is a little bit tall. And then here on the other side of the stage, waiting because he will read a little excerpt of your book, is Vincent Stills. Who is Vincent Stills? He's kind of a fish person, like an underwater guy.
Yeah. Made for the deep, deep ocean. So basically, about a kilometer of water has to be above him for him to survive.
Wow. So he always has to be under pressure, but how can he then operate, like, because he's also a pilot, or his people are usually hired as pilots, so they have to be like
Yeah,
in a big.
so the thing is, I was figuring that if you have something that's able to survive huge pressures already, when you're a pilot doing really high acceleration maneuvers, it won't be any different to you than the pressure. And so they can fly in ships that can do way, way more G's than regular people can. And
Mm.
they're more flexible and more creative than AIs. And so they make great fighter pilots.
Speaking of AIs, the other protagonist in your book, it's a group of people. They pull off a con or a scam or a heist or whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
call it. Is St. Matthews, and St. Matthews is an AI. And if the camera could go towards the table in front of us, there's a rotating globe above an emitting device, and this is now I forgot what the painting is called by Caravaggio. The calling of Saint Matthew. Basically, the AI in your book believes that he is the apostle Saint Matthew, and he needs to convert sinners um, to find religion. And so he's also flawed. That it's just, oh boy, I'm gushing here again. Uh, given the wonders. Lastly, in the back of the, oh, let's wait for the camera. Here we go. Yeah, look a little bit, St. Matthew. Behind us is Alfonso Loon playing William Gander, and he's in a cage.
Poor
Why
Will
is he?
Gander.
Why is he in the cage, Derek? What's the deal with these Newmans and the puppets? It's a weird BDSM cult that you're describing.
I yeah, so what happened was there, one of the, like, I am a molecular biologist, and so one of the things that I think is an anxiety of mine in like real life is that what happens when we start genetically engineering people who aren't born yet. At some
Mhm.
point, somebody's going to start doing that. And I thought some of the most awful things that could happen is you might genetically engineer a slave species that might like to be enslaved. And that's how we made the puppets. But at some point, the puppets who were trying to preserve their Newman, their masters,
Right?
realized that their masters were fighting amongst themselves and killing each other. And they said, well, to protect them, we're just going to take them all captive. And then the treatment they'd learned to expect when they were the slaves, they they see that as religiously sort of valuable. And so they visit some of that upon, the people who are now in cages. And they do
Th-
that as sort of religious rites.
This is really such an amazing plot twist that the masters want to create slaves so that they don't have to do these menial jobs, and then the slaves realize they worship their masters, and they realize, wait a minute, these masters of ours, these gods, are self-destructive. We have to protect them by whipping them and put them in cages. I love that. I think you're going to read a little bit of the Bible, right? A little bit
Yes, a
later.
bit from the Puppet Bible, the best Bible.
Now I'm gonna try to because people have accused me, not the book clubbers so much as my wife in real life, that I'm often convoluted in sort of putting a synopsis together or being concise. So I'm practicing here. Now, so I read The Quantum Magician and The Quantum Garden in preparation for the show. Your new book that's out right now is The House of Sticks. All these books are on the table right here in front of us. People in the world can click them and they get shot to your website. um, so let me try to keep it simple for our audience who may not have read these books. How would I describe the world of quantum evolution? Now, the story takes place in the 25th century. Humans have colonized space with the help of wormholes. They are able to travel very, very long distances. People know what wormholes are, I hope. It's like the teleport function in Second Life. Genetically engineered humans are very common. Most of them are sort of failed experiments. We don't really know who's running these experiments. It's hinted at that the banks have tried their hand in creating better, more efficient people to do whatever, but also private interest groups. And a group of these genetically engineered misfits, I would say, or otherwise augmented. They're led by this guy Belisarius Arjona, who is the Homo Quantus, essentially a human supercomputer, and they get this job to they get hired by a group of revolutionaries to move a fleet of spaceships from one port of the galaxy, part of the wormhole, to the other part without anybody noticing. Is that does that sound about right?
That sounds really good. I don't know what your wife is talking about. That was a great summary.
She's American, you know how they are. Um, now, I uh, am your style in the beginning really. I mean, I gotta tell you the prose, the style is so assured. It really reminded me of Neuromancer a little bit in the very beginning, and then it kind of expands. But you're fairly new at this writing thing, no? I mean, at this level,
Yes and no.
oh,
It's my first book that's published, but I had 5 other novels that weren't published. So I mean, each
oh,
of those gives experience, and I've been publishing short fiction since 2006, I think. So I had 12 years there where I was publishing in some of the top journals of science fiction and in the United States, and so I've been trying to, like many writers, you try and write for a long time and you
right,
fail an awful lot, and nobody sees the failing because it never goes anywhere, but still
yep.
it gives you experience.
Would you publish those if somebody would those five other books? Would you publish them if somebody says, "Hey, let's do an early works of Derek Künsken thing,
um,
special deal"?
I certainly wouldn't do that with the first 3 because now I wouldn't want my name associated with it. Not because the ideas are bad, but just I mean the execution was so not my best work.
Mm.
I did show my agent my 4th novel, and she said, I have no idea how to make this better, which is not a good sign. And then I showed her my 5th novel, and she gave me a bunch of comments on that one. And my publisher is interested in seeing it, but I think it would probably take me 3 or 4 months of work to fix it up. So I'm going to do that at some point when I've got a bit of time in front of me.
I want to tell folks here in the room, if I ignore your comment, please just be, obnoxious and cut and paste it again, and I'll pick it up. It depends where we are in the conversation. I'm not ignoring you. As a matter of fact, that's another well-meaning critique from my beloved wife that I should involve the audience more. Elfbiter says early works may be a source of embarrassment, and I guess like what Derek was saying, the the stylistic execution changes, but you can probably recycle a lot of ideas, right?
Some. The thing is, as I got more experience at reading science fiction, because I had not read a lot, I realized that in some of my earlier works, really, I was dealing with a lot of Star Trek like rubber-headed aliens,
Hmm.
which felt a little cliche, and so I didn't want to be perceived as cliche, and so I became a lot more forceful in interrogating my ideas and saying, have I seen this somewhere before? And if I did, I would try for a new idea. And I'm not saying I get to new things all the time, but it's definitely something I try to avoid doing much of what I've seen before.
This is really interesting. This is a question I ask often because I'm wondering if there's a certain it can paralyzing state where you feel everything has been done. Could this be a double-edged sword if you're looking around making sure that this hasn't been done, and then you realize, wait a minute, everything has been done, maybe I should stop writing altogether?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the puppets, like your reaction to the puppets, and I do apologize for having created the puppets every time I have this kind of conversation, but I don't think I'd seen that before,
Yep.
right? And the idea of doing the Homo quantus, this species that could see sort of quantum perceptions and stuff, I had seen Stephen Baxter do a short story about somebody who had that. And to my mind, he didn't go far enough in it. Like I really wanted to see more, and I wanted to see it more developed. And so that's where I got, Belisarius. And
Right.
and I think I get a lot of ideas by looking at what other authors have done, and then I say, would I have done it that way? And very often my answer is about 90 degrees away from what they did, and all of a sudden it feels fresh, at least to me.
This is really interesting. In the chat here, before I forget, this is jumping back and forth between topics. High saying wormholes are when you get disconnected, right? Oh, she's referring to the teleports in Second Life. Well, the teleports in Second Life are probably wormholes would work a lot better. Um, yeah. Um, Now I would say, why don't we do a little reading taste, and Derek will read too. But I had an idea that we would invite from the quantum magician Belisarius, the quantum human,
Hmm.
Homo Quantus, and also Vincent Stills, who you already introduced. And Vincent Stills, now he is from the tribe of the mongrels, but only they themselves are allowed to call themselves mongrels. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that means, the
Uh,
mongrel?
so the mongrels is an okay term. It's that they don't want anybody else to call them dogs. And there was a question in the chat that said, does some of my short fiction make its way into my novels? And I said absolutely, because my very first story that got published in Asimov's was the origin story of these creatures that have to live at the bottom of the ocean and so on, and how they mix genes and everything else. And when I was writing The Quantum Magician, I pulled in every ideas from every short story or novelette or novella that I had written that would fit. And so I ended up having like 3 or 4 or 5 different stories contributing to it. But basically, there are people that are, looked down upon and are only good for certain things. And so they've got a, sticking the middle finger up to the rest of the world sort of attitude to everything. And so yeah, they're sometimes favorites of people, and sometimes people say they swear too much.
They do swear a lot, and I already had actually it's in announcing this yesterday. People were saying, "Oh no, swearing! I don't like it." So, let me just say, when swearing occurs in Derek's work, it's not gratuitous swearing. It is very coherent with the persona of yeah, of that person's character. That's all I can say. So the little excerpt that we're reading, I think Vincent has entered the stage here. Belisarius is here. Wonderful. Now the little excerpt that we're reading is Belisarius has to hire all these folks for the big heist, and he needs a good pilot, and the mongrels are known as very, very good pilots, and they do a lot of contracting work for whoever pays. Very independent minded folks, very proud workers. This is another aspect of your books that I really enjoy. There's a lot of sort of class analysis hidden, or maybe I, as a amateur Marxist, maybe I read into it. Who knows? But he Belisarius is at this race, and Vincent just won this race, and he goes up to um, Vincent, and Vincent thinks like, "What is this human dude doing here?" And we'll take it from here. And I think Vincent is starting, so let's start with Vincent.
What the you doing on this side of the mess?
I figured you were showboating, but you didn't just want to beat the others. You wanted to wipe their noses in it.
Where'd you come up with that, Angel Boy?
I've read The Way of the Mongrel. I can quote some of the good bits. Bite every hand, piss on everyone's leg, lick your balls if you can find them.
You forgot, unless you're doing the thing, you're getting.
I didn't want to come across as a know it all. I'm hiring for a job.
I already got a job.
Don't take any more jobs on the side?
I take some working vacations.
I need you to take some extended leave. I need a free diver with giant cojones.
If I could find my cojones, I'd let you lick them, but I got a boss expecting me to pilot the fastest fighters this side of hell.
Give it a think, Stills. I'm offering the most dangerous mission you've ever seen. When we pull this off, people won't be talking about what we did for years. They'll be talking about it forever.
Shit, little man, don't wet your pants. Front me a deposit, and I'll look at what you're proposing.
And Cut and Vincent and Belisarius, this was excellent reading. You have a future ahead of you. And I apologize for sensitive listeners. We did bleep almost everything that needed to be bleeped. Any comments, Derek?
No, that was amazing. I loved it.
There is a dynamic with this, setting it up as this group of people. I mentioned earlier, I mean, people. I think somebody said like it's the quantum magician is Ocean's 11 in space or something like that.
Hmm.
Is that offensive to you? Is that sort of
No, no,
minimizing
no,
it?
no. When I first met my agent in 2015, I was hoping to get an agent. And then after a while we were talking and she found out I had a publication history and she said, "Have you got a novel?" And I said, "Yes, it's Ocean's 11 meets Guardians of the Galaxy." And she said, "Send it to me." Right.
Ah,
And then she sold it to Rebellion by saying it was Ocean's 11 in space. And my French publisher says it's, oh, darn it. You were just talking about the author, the other molecular biologist in Canada.
Peter Watts.
Yeah, Peter Watts on laughing gas is what my French publisher calls it.
Oh, that's awesome. I sent Peter an email because he was on the book club and he has several avatars, but as of late he appears as a coronavirus. Um, People find that sometimes a little bit too soon. I find it quite hilarious. Now, with our reading done, I would like you now to please read for us, if you will, Derek, and magically a book stand will appear, and
Okay,
we will hear.
I'm going to try my walking, and I'm hopefully going to impress everybody with my walking.
Look
Oh.
at this. Yes. Yeah, you overshot it. Take your time.
This is
Big
hey.
round of applause. Round of applause for Derek. Look at this. He made it. So now we're going to hear from the aforementioned puppets. The puppets are about a meter in height. And again, they were engineered to do all sorts of dirty work. And now that they have, um, I don't know, enslaved their former masters, but built an entire religion around it, you're going to read a little bit of the Bible where they talk about their origin and their path and how they arrived at their convictions.
Yeah, and so this scene is from chapter 26 of the Quantum Magician. It's Will Gander himself is actually reading the Puppet Bible as research for the con, and so that's where we're starting.
We should add that William Gander is an important part because he is going to be genetically engineered to basically to be infiltrated into the puppet structure as one of those dominating humans. So that means that he might actually die on the inside, right? Because he's sort of taking those risks. Um, and William Gander, like you said, is preparing for the con by reading up on puppet history and theology, and he finds this just absolutely disturbing.
Yeah. So here we are at chapter 26, and this is like those Encyclopedia Encyclopedia Galactica entries in Asimov's. So from the introduction to defining faith in a world of cut strings, an exegesis of the Puppet Bible by Elizabeth Creston 12, Bishop of Port Stubbs, 2490. The study of theology and the exegesis of the Puppet Bible is remarkably complex, given the essentially polytheistic context of the Newman. The richness of the Newmanarchy source material covers so broad a range of topics, sometimes in such contradictory or ambiguous terms, that its sheer volume constitutes an obstacle to spiritual understanding. And the corpus continues to grow. Scholars continue to reflect on the records of the Newman of the Edenic period, as well as on interviews with the last surviving puppets who had direct contact with the pre-fall Newman. The unending growth of the scripture has not, and should not, slow the process of exegesis. Contextualizing and balancing contradictions is too important a task to wait. Natural scriptural oppositions like, get the hell out, the book of Angry Things, chapter 6, verse 4, and get the hell over here, chapter 4, verse 12, And look at me, you little pisshead, the book of how to behave, chapter 2, verse 12, and don't you dare raise your eyes to me, chapter 14, verse 4, are amenable to some analysis based on the contextual and moral differences in each situation, and even, to some extent, the status of different Newmen. Far more complex are the verses concerning Mooney Four's dilemma. Scriptural quotes such as, do you want money? I can give you money. Just let me go. I'll leave my wife and children. Just let me go. Please let me go. The book of pleas and threats, chapter 3, verse 3. And if you don't let us go, I'm going to flay the skin off you, puppet, chapter 3, verse 17. A holistic approach to theology highlights the multidimensionality of the spiritual word with verses such as, good boy, and I don't know what I'd do without you, the book of the good boy, chapter 1, verses 1 and 9, and you missed a spot here, the book of assessments and punishments, chapter 3, verse 8, which invite banal interpretations without sacrificing moral insight. Some of the most profound fallen age theologians have demonstrated the value of parsing apparently banal scripture for symbolic meaning. Who among us has not missed a spot? Is any puppet capable of not missing a spot, or are all puppets flawed, imperfect? If the flaw is intentional, was it the Numenarchy's intent for this flaw? Some theorize that the creation of flawed puppets imposes an arrow of time onto the cosmos, from imperfect creation to the eventual attainment of moral perfection. Further questioning of the last Numen who were alive during the fall may reveal something of the intentions of the first generation of the Numen of the Edenic period. But if the imperfect nature of puppethood is unintentional, then parallels with Judeo-Christian theology are less useful, while the arguments of classical Greek philosophers who had to systematize an ethic balancing layers of gods and titans and men are perhaps more meaningful for the puppet ethicists of today. More recent scholarship has brought novel questions to theology. William tossed the reader on the bed in disgust. You don't like it? Gates 15 asked. William stared at him. Puppets are crazy.
And this is Derek Künsken reading from the Quantum Magician here a little bit from the Puppet Bible. So all this background stuff, I mean, this is really, this is incredibly unique because you explore, I mean, you explore with the other races too, the nature of, I don't know, what it means to be human, and what was your, I guess, what was your source material for this? I mean, did you plow through Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Kant?
No, so I come from a Catholic family on my mother's French Canadian side. So religion existed, but I was not raised with any religious thing. But I felt that in my teen years, I did read the New Testament because I wanted to see what it was about. And so I could see some of the stuff in there, but it wasn't for me. I let everybody make their own religious choices. I make mine. But I find the questioning that we do about spirituality and religion to be fascinating, because I think there's some really important questions in there. Whether
Yep.
you're a theist or not a theist, I think there are some important questions in that. And so I've listened to some stuff on the history of the Bible and how is it put together and stuff like that. And I just find that really fascinating. And I think the most fun thing you can do for your own writing is to find something that you think is fun and fascinating and just, put it into science fiction, twist it a little bit, and then, there you are. And again, I don't know how much, religion is something that's been treated a lot with science fiction. I don't know if it's been treated exactly this way, because you've got people who have been genetically engineered to feel religious awe when they're around their masters, and their masters didn't treat them very well, and obviously they were swearing at them and hitting them and doing other things. And to the puppets, it was all just spiritual fulfillment. and
Absolutely.
and they would capture every single word that we would recognize as like, well, they were just passing you a bill, or they were just getting you to do something. But to the puppets, it's all lived miraculous experience. And so yeah, the puppets are crazy.
Well, maybe okay. I'm not gonna
Maybe
get
not.
into well, I mean, you're also explore like the attention that they get through. I mean, there's a disturbing scene where William Gander, who is engineered to be exuding these the smells that the puppet pick up on and go like, oh my God, this is one of the gods. We got to worship him. And then it's between being in a cage, naked in a cage, or being whipped with a whip, and the pain leads to this religious breakthrough, and it's also a means to getting attention. I mean, pain is the attention getter here for people, that they feel this person cares about me.
Yeah, no, it I do apologize for the puppets, but no, they were a fascinating subspecies of humanity to try and explore, and it was so much fun.
I'm actually looking at this. You should not apologize for them, because this is incredibly incredible food for thought. Their relationship, it's really something where you want to dig a little deeper. Actually, I'm looking here because I forgot to bring in a slide about the Mooney 4 dilemma, but I don't want to get bogged down in too much detail because this is just absolutely brilliant. I put up a slide here where Belisarius, they're talking about the fable of the scorpion, and this is along the explorations that you do about human nature, and how much is the genetic engineering, how much does that do to influence the protagonist's actions, and how much is just who they are. So here you're right. There's a fable going back millennia of a scorpion who asked a frog to carry him across a river. The frog said no because he didn't want to be stung. The scorpion pointed out that if the scorpion stung the frog, they would both die. So the frog carried the scorpion on its back, but in the middle of the river, the scorpion stung the frog, dying. The frog asked why the scorpion had done that. It's my nature, the scorpion said. So, I mean, the protagonists in the book, they're genetically engineered, and they argue about that. I mean, they say, well, this is how we were made. And what I find really fascinating is that Belisarius, the supercomputer, the Homo Quantus, leaves his planet. And I don't know if you are if the Homo Quantus for you are academics who like to do research and they like to study, but they don't want to interact with the real world. So that's how I sort of interpreted them,
Hmm.
because the Homo Quantus, they really, they never leave their home. They're completely absorbed in their research. And Belisarius, they can't understand Belisarius, the hero, who leaves the planet, the safety. I mean, there's a lot more going on too. I mean, sort of a coming of age and leaving home, and why would you even leave home if the world out there is so brutal? But but I got the sense that these are maybe people who just thrive in academic research more than anything.
Definitely. Like they've been genetically engineered to amp up their curiosity to really absurd levels. And so what satisfies that curiosity, that itch, that need, is new discovery and seeing new patterns. And so in a very real way, the things that they like aren't have been determined by somebody else. And I mean, we go through life and we've been programmed as well, but there is no programmer, right? I mean, I like fatty things to eat, I like sugary things to eat. That's evolved because we want, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, we needed high caloric intake, and so our taste buds are made to find things that have higher calories. Um, and 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 so we're programmed as much as anything else. But I think people like Stills and Belisarius and the puppets can question and look back and say it's only been 3 or 4 or 10 generations that we've been engineered, and it's other people who engineered us for their own purposes. And the idea of liking things because somebody else wants you to, I find that disturbing. And that's, I think, one of the things that we can do with genetic engineering. And that's basically the puppets and the Homo Quantus have this sort of similarity in that the Homo Quantus are really into and get huge satisfaction out of research and, knowing things beyond all proportion, beyond sort of moderation. And the puppets feel the same way about the Newman. And so it was interesting to look at, what does that talk about free will, and what does it talk about us right now? Because we're being exposed to all sorts of things. Like Facebook is addictive, Instagram is addictive, even though it's destructive at the same time as it's being addictive. The fact is, tech
I would argue
companies,
that things that are addictive are destructive in the long run.
yeah. Well, and the thing is, tech companies are taking it, like they're figuring out what buttons they can use to squeeze more money out of us. So yeah, I think science fiction explores the future to say something about now.
I want to bring in another quote that I have here. Why leave home? I mean, this is the question I was going to ask you, if the Homo quantus, if you see a little bit of yourself as a molecular biologist that is now sort of freeing himself. I don't know if that's still your day job, but freeing yourself from this field to become a writer. But here, this conversation between Bell and Cassandra, his love interest, but they grew up together. Do you think you could ever come home, Belle? She asked. I don't know. Is it better out here? She asked. I didn't leave because I would be more comfortable in the wide world. I am not. Um, this is just a conversation that I think every one of us has with our friends, colleagues, and family. If you leave the place where you're from and others maybe don't, and um, if it's necessary to go around the world to find yourself or not. The Jerry is mentioning here in the local chat fate versus free will. I of course had to. This is an educational program, so I looked up what determinism means. Um, I'm bringing up the slide. If the camera could zoom in. Determinism is the philosophical view that all events are determined completely by previously existing causes. Determinism is often contrasted with free will, although some philosophers claim that the two are compatible. Now, this is interesting, Derek. For you, is this compatible? What have you come? What's your conclusion after writing these books?
Um, even before writing the books, I think I had drank the Kool-Aid on, understanding what the implications of quantum theory is, because in Newtonian thinking, when Newton figured out his laws of motion, they said if you could know where every particle was in the universe and where it was moving to perfect precision, then the universe would just be a clock unwinding and you could predict all events. And that introduced, fate to science, or science to fate. But at the turn of the 20th century, the 1900s, they found that in fact you can't know the position and velocity of any single particle to the amount of precision you might want or need to do that. And so there's no real determinism in that sense, because you can always have some quantum fluctuation here or something's a little off there, and so randomness is at the subatomic world is everywhere. So I think free will is there, but the thing is, we're also computer programs running on certain kinds of hardware, and that hardware is determined partly by genetics and partly by how we developed in the womb, and also how we developed once we were out of the womb, how much food we had, what kind of food we had, what kind of stimulus we got. So the thing is, all of those factors influence the kind of hardware that we're running on. And then later on, you have the software, which is like the kinds of educational tools and intellectual tools you're given. And I sometimes look at all of the opportunity I had growing up to learn and to go to university and stuff like that, and even just be exposed to new ideas. And I really, sometimes get this idea of there, but for the grace of God, go I sort of idea, that like, if I hadn't had those ideas, I might have been a real jerk, or I might have been somebody who's, very absolutist, or like education, I think, certainly saved me from being, something I don't think I would have respected. And so yeah, there's a whole complex of
But
stuff in here.
this is super interesting. And now this is actually a question somebody asked me earlier. Is hard sci-fi a little bit, I think Jerry asked that, is hard sci-fi a little bit complicated? Is it maybe too hard? And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because you really, I mean, you're going deep into these concepts, and I looked up a little bit. I tried to learn as much as I could for preparation of this show, um, and it's just whetting the appetite. It's just going in a little bit, but that's why I personally find your or the genre of hard sci-fi as it's defined um, so refreshing and ultimately satisfying. But you're talking in the sense of now the physics part of it, but I don't know what you're saying is makes sense to me, but it's also a little bit depressing that it feels that we're all just going along paths that have been somewhat laid out for us in
Well,
some ways.
I think,
And let me add one more thing. Sorry to
yeah,
step in on you, because in the quantum garden, there's the time travel device is at the core, and it's very cool. Everybody loves time travel stories, and this is an amazing implementation of a lot of time travel stuff that we know, and you're really kind of expanding on it. But that's you put that into the context of obviously who are we, and there's an interaction with the two main protagonists that become other people over time. And when you were talking about college and that kind of stuff, I mean, I look at myself as different people. I think everybody does. I think it's pretty normal. You look at yourself in different stages of your life, somewhat detached, right? I think that's actually pretty healthy.
yeah.
Because I think I could hang out with the 18-year-old me, but maybe not for long, I
Oh,
guess.
I'm sure I wouldn't want to hang out with 18-year-old me for long. I think, I around 2012 or 2011, I think it was all the nonsense about trans, rights in the US. And you had like the southern states banning trans people from using the washrooms they wanted to and stuff like that. And I mean, that led me to say, there's a bunch of things I don't understand. And so I started following people on Twitter and Facebook who were trans. And I did the same thing for African Americans and African Canadians, because I didn't know those experiences. I didn't know their experiences. And I think even in the last 10 years, I mean, the amount of knowledge and learning I've learned just by being quiet and listening to what somebody else's experience is of living a different life than mine has made me, continued to make me grow. And I think that, yes, the software runs in the hardware, but at the same time, if you try, you can try new software and incorporate it in. So I don't think it's necessarily depressing, but I think if you don't put any effort into it, I think it's very possible to, run on a loop.
So you always have to upgrade, Shyla says here in the chat. But does it also mean that the people that we meet, the people that inspire us, does that mean that certain people will never have an opportunity to, meet people? I mean, I would say I can tell you a handful of people who I met at the right time in my life, and you can argue there's coincidence, but there are certain steps. It looks like it was pre-programmed in a sense
Yeah.
that there are links to it. If I look back and if I analyze it from the outside, I go like, I met Katya because she was friends with Sandy, but then she was there, and that's why I moved over there, and that opened up this door, and blah 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 blue. And then this job didn't come through, and then it turned out to be a blessing 5 years later because of those kind of things. So does it mean that all that people who we look at as unfortunate in terms of their fulfilled lives, I guess that they are, because I mean there's a lot of religions that believe that they're being punished by not having these opportunities.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. I mean, on the idea, like, we have pretty strong pattern recognition inside us. Like, that's part of the hardware of being a human being. And and it works for some things, like, oh, look, there's a bunch of antelope walking that way and I see them walking that way every day or something. But I mean, in the larger picture, like, it's not evolved for looking through time. And so we can often look back at things and we'll put patterns and causality into things that actually are just random events. And if, for example, I hadn't met, this one person here, I would have met a different person, a year later or whatever, right? And so I think without seeing all the paths not taken, things can look deterministic and look fated. But I think if you look at all the paths that might have been taken, even though you can't see them, I think then we see that it's sort of like a choose your own adventure. As you make choice after choice after choice, certain possibilities close off, other ones open up. And the thing is, yeah, I guess I could, if my mother had not said something to me at a certain time, if somebody else had not said something to me at a certain time, I wouldn't have sort of pushed the software upgrade, let's say. And
you would have delayed it, maybe.
Maybe I would have delayed it, or what if I'd, at one point I was thinking of maybe joining the military. When I was going to university, I would have been an officer. And I ended up going to a civilian university because they taught genetics and the military didn't. And the thing is, my mother is really happy that I didn't go there because she's worried about how my personality might have changed, being influenced by, just being influenced by that for 4 years. And I think at that formative age, and no knocks against the military or anything. I've got a lot of friends and I really appreciate it. But, the kind of person I've become is different than maybe what I would have become if I'd have taken that path. So, yeah, this is complex.
It sure is. And Derek, this is such a stimulating conversation, just as your books. If you're just tuning in, we're talking with Derek Künsken, and we're talking primarily about the quantum evolution. Although the book that is out now is The House of Sticks, and Derek will read from it. But also coming soon is the Quantum War, and I guess that's the conclusion. Is this a trilogy? Everybody writes trilogies these days, I guess.
I made it a tetralogy. It's the third of
Ah,
4.
oh, a tetralogy. We had someone, we had Gautam on. He has a duology.
Yep,
He was
the House of Sticks is going to be a duology.
ah. So now, before we go into the House of Sticks, I do want to run through, because we're talking about quantum people, and what do people remember of quantum theory? If they remember anything, please put it in the local chat. I found out that quantum theory is the theoretical basis of modern physics that explains the nature and behavior of matter and energy on the atomic and subatomic level, like on the really, really small scale. And I also found out that Max Planck, there's a lot of Max Planck institutes in my hometown of Munich. He was formulating this, um, I think around 1900s.
1900.
Here it is. He was I'm reading this. Planck had sought to discover the reason that radiation from a glowing body changes in color from red to orange and finally to blue as its temperature rises. And then he experimented with that. And then a little while later, Niels Bohr came along. And I know where this is going to go. People know where this is going to go. This is going to go to Schrödinger's cat that everybody remembers. But we got to talk about it because it's relevant for the book. Now, Niels Bohr, a Danish physicist, um, postulated issued the Copenhagen interpretation. A particle cannot be assumed to even exist until it is measured. Objective reality does not exist. This translates to a principle called superposition that claims that while we do not know what the state of any object is, as long as we don't look to check. So that means, Derek, basically that we may, if nobody is watching the Second Life Book Club, it may not even be happening. Now, thankfully, I'm looking at YouTube, and we're live on the air. Now, in terms of your book, how is that relevant to what's happening with Belisarius and his folks?
So the Copenhagen, so the thing is, it starts with like this 2-slit experiment I mean, the Schrödinger's cat is probably the one that people are most familiar with, where you have this particle that can decay. It's in a box, and if it decays, it'll release a poison. The poison will kill a cat. But if the cat is in the box, then in theory, you don't know, like the cat is part of that superposition. And so Copenhagen interpretation is that, you know, the particle, you can never really know what's going to happen until you observe it. And there's also an interpretation called the many worlds interpretation, which is, you know, in one universe, the particle decays and the cat dies. And in another universe, the particle doesn't decay and the cat is alive. And so you have this multiple universes. I didn't use either interpretation for the quantum magician because one of the ones I wanted to use was basically where the conscious observer has a larger role in it. It's if you want to look it up, it's like Wigner's friend, I believe. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to write a story about somebody with quantum perceptions because I wanted to spend a lot of time thinking about what would that look like? What would it do to their personality? What would the world be like? What would they see? And that was a lot of fun. And I mean, obviously that's where we're moving from hard science fiction to soft science fiction because, you know, it's not really that possible. So the thing is, you know, that was one of the areas where I took a little more, you know, leeway to make it an interesting story and a fun story that I wanted to read.
Wait a minute.
But yeah,
What's the
the
difference here between soft and I didn't understand the your separation of soft and hard sci-fi.
so hard sci-fi, basically, like the hardest sci-fi will be using science that we already know and we're already sure about, or pretty good extrapolations.
Hmm.
So the thing is, if you look at The Martian, you know, it's all, you know, chemistry, it's physics, it's planetology, it's stuff like that. And much of the same can be said about The House of Sticks. However, you can get into things that science right now says, you know, it's just impossible, like traveling at the speed of light or past the speed of light. So Star Trek would be soft science fiction because they have anti-gravity and
And
traveling at three
teleportation. Mhm.
yeah, exactly. So there's a bunch of things that aren't possible and we know aren't possible. And if you use those, then really you're getting into either soft sci-fi or, as some say, fantasy.
Ah, see, now this was never really clear to me. This is totally fascinating. People may observe that I put Schrödinger's cat here on the projector here on the board. This is an illustration I got from moviesandscience.com. Interesting website. This is Schrödinger's cat in here, and the cat is dead and alive at the same time. And this was in response to the superposition theory. This was put out by Erwin Schrödinger, who was trying to disprove Niels Bohr's theory. In I want to go through the chat here because there's some interesting comments. Elfbiter says, note that the conscious mind collapses the quantum state is not one promoted by most quantum scientists. Elfbiter goes very much
Yeah,
agrees.
agree.
A tree does not care what the humans think. It falls anyway. That's good. Is so is that what he means by the conscious mind collapses the quantum state? It
Oh,
means that
just
stuff
that's
happens even if we, contemplate it or not.
I think that's about whether you believe that reality is concrete and exists independent of us. And I tend to subscribe to that too, that, you know, before 6 million years ago, when there was no real intelligence on the earth was still here. It was still circling the sun. It still had weather. Things still happened. Just because nobody was here to think about it doesn't mean it didn't, that it wasn't happening. I have arguments like that with my son sometimes, who tries to take absurdist arguments too far, but he's only 16.
Oh boy, that will not change when they grow 18. I used the term propaganda last weekend when my son's girlfriend, who was very nice, she was here for dinner, and I talked about a commercial that I found offensive because it basically says you can use plastic and don't worry about it, and I called it propaganda. And my son was rolling his eyes, and then I said, are you embarrassed, with like what I'm saying? I try to keep it down, I mean, I'm trying to be respectful. I know I can be too goofy. And he says, yeah, you used the term propaganda. You sounded like one of them QAnon people. I go, wait, just because I use that term, that's a legitimate term to describe an advertisement campaign of that sort. I was like, yeah, just don't use that word. Um, I digress. Tsai says the book, what is this book? The Baby's Guide, Quantum Physics for Babies is the world's most boring children's book, she says here. And I. Austin here says hard sci-fi ought to be based on likely engineering principles. That's a good definition that I guess. Another concept, Derek, that we see in your that I looked up after reading the book, and I know folks want more readings, and we're going to get to this reading, is the concept of block time.
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta look this up. I think I should have a slide. But what is block time?
So when Einstein was talking about, you can't talk about space and time being separate. You have space time only, and it's 4-dimensional. He talked about, if you basically the seconds of the world are all like sheets of a paper in a book, and you put them together and it makes a block of stuff, because events are happening in space-time. And so the thing is, block time is this idea that gets to that determinism thing where there's a little less free will. And I have that be one of the philosophies that the Homo Quantus adhere to, where, like some Homo Quantus do, where they think of block time as opposed to, let's say being a quantum realist, which would be more of a Copenhagen interpretation thing.
Now we have, of course, because we like visual representation, we have a block here, a block universe that is lying just right in front of me. Um, this is block time right there, and the block time is now magically coming up here and floating around. So we call that a primitive after the movie Tron, but that's our own interpretation of block time. But seriously, this is really fascinating, and it's important in the book. And this is also referred to as eternalism, where past, present, and future is supposed to be existing at the same time. The slide in the background, you'll see this illustration where the baby, the adult, and the old person are in a block, and they're all uh, black and sharply outlined, versus what we usually look at time as is that we perceive the presence, and the baby is grayed out and the old person is grayed out. So that's really the difference in eternalism. And I guess, Derek, that's the same as block time.
Yeah, it's one of the ways that the Homo Quantus look at the universe, and it's, they have competing schools of interpretation.
The oops, sorry, I heard some noise. I hope
Sorry,
that
there was a
wasn't.
motorcycle driving by my house.
Oh, but I didn't hear it, so it didn't really drive by your house, I guess.
That's right.
Um, uh, what was I going to say? Yeah, so the Homo Quantus lives with this is his reality, but um, just real quick, Belisarius, who moves outside of this circle, and he talks about his instincts a lot. This is something I didn't quite understand. How does he actually define instinct then, when he lives in this world with these concepts?
I think he would have a much greater sense of what hardwiring has been done to him, right? This urge, we can feel very hungry, or we can feel very tired. He can feel very, very curious, and to the point that it becomes uncomfortable, to the point that his brain starts doing things that he doesn't want it to do, that it goes down pathways he doesn't want to. And so I think, because he's circulated among regular humans, he's circulated among puppets, he's aware of how much different he is than them, and in what ways, and he knows that those ways are because he's been genetically engineered to feel these things. So I think his instincts are very observable in that sense, right? Like, I mean, I
So
can
instincts in his world is no different than how we define instinct. It's just basically
exactly.
I mean, I would define instinct as, it's based on stuff that I learned so that I intuitively just do stuff and I don't even have to consciously um prepare thinking about it, I guess,
Hmm.
before I do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I should have looked up a definition of instinct, but let's read some more. Now, the quantum war. Okay, so you have four parts, so it's not a conclusion, but we leave off with these plants um, that pollinate themselves through the time travel device. This is an
Hmm.
insane concept. Um, I have not read the Quantum Warrior because it's not available. What? Please set up the scene. What is happening here?
So the quantum magician was a sort of Ocean's 11 in space. The quantum garden was a sort of Back to the Future in space, and the quantum war is really the playing out of the conflict that was generated in those first two books. And um, it basically, this is I'm going to be reading from the start of the book, and I should practice standing up again,
Hmm.
and I'm going to see if I can walk again.
You can walk because um, it's not happening. It's not observing. If Derek falls off the stage,
There I am.
there you go. Oh, here
Okay,
Shyla is asking real quick before we start, is he
sure.
introspective then? Oh, this comes out of the discussion about instincts and all that. Would you say that Belisarius is an introspective person? Our whole
Oh,
book
very
one.
much.
Hmm.
Very, very, very much. And the other thing I'd say is like I think that there is a lot of hard science in the quantum magician and quantum garden. And I mean, if you can treat that as magic or you can just skip the book altogether. The book that I think is like that deals with more science that is like, away from the quantum stuff is the House of Sticks.
Hmm.
So, people can self-sort if they want to. Although I still
Well,
think I really love the Quantum Magician myself. That's why I wrote it.
we are a inclusive, omnivorous crowd here, and the beauty about the Second Life Book Club is that we don't have to. We're not in the marketing profession. Thank the Lord Almighty. We don't have an 8 week window in which to sell books. We the books persist here. They're like Schrodinger's books, if you will. They they
Perfect.
they they sell or are read or they are not read. I'm sorry, I'm going all over I'll let you read, but Elfbiter says here the fourth book after this one is Lady and the Tramp in Space. So there's an idea. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so this is the first chapter. This is chapter 1 of Quantum War. So chapter 1, April 25, 15. The sulfuric acid clouds of Venus floated beyond the window, their ochre puffs and hollows and shadows expanding and contracting as winds pulled them. The scarecrow hadn't spoken for long moments, which wasn't strange for these AIs and their secretive human souls, but this one hummed tunelessly. Lieutenant Colonel Barret had never heard one hum and didn't know what to think. The scarecrow might not even know it was doing it. The humming had overlapped with a lengthy assessment of Barret's career. A swiveling lens eye zoomed audibly on Barret. The scarecrows were designed to unsettle observers, but the humming hinted that the scarecrow might not be entirely stable, as if a parallel track of information processed in the artificial intelligence without its knowledge, as if the AI were haunted. You performed quite satisfactorily in Epsilon Indi for the last 4 years, the scarecrow said. Her gravelly feminine voice sounded distant, reaching from the other side of a death. The impression of femininity might be genuine, although scarecrows carried little of their identity past the death of the spies they'd once been. Thank you, she said. The scarecrow's lines of logic seemed to follow more indirect paths than the one she'd worked with in Epsilon Indi. That vanished one had been pragmatic, focused, dogged, and rarely mysterious. This one reasoned in elliptical arcs, following multi-layered musical logic. The winds outside became ghostly sounds to those in the mid-levels of the Ministry of Intelligence. The globe building followed the winds at various altitudes, its location at any time a state secret. The scarecrow lumbered to the window, sounding of flexing piezoceramic musculature and carbon steel joints. Floppy gloved fingers adjusted a button on the plain carbon weave shirt. I appreciated your espionage findings on the puppets, the Scarecrow said. Her tone was sweet and ghastly, and her accent an antique French from last century. Your postgraduate work in biotechnology made you uniquely insightful in the field. I could be out there again, Barré said. I didn't apply for this promotion and I haven't been to staff college. And I like the fieldwork. She hadn't found a rhythm in this new role in the last 3 weeks either. It felt like an ill-fitting tunic. And even if she could go back, the Epsilon Indy was different now. The disappearance of the Scarecrow is unfortunate, the spectral voice continued. Her statement didn't surprise Barré. The emotion reading software in the interrogation suites was powerful, and they read facial expressions constantly, especially among their own people. One became accustomed to feeling exposed. I should be continuing his work, Barré said. That would be a waste, she said, with a flat, definitive tone that belied the winsome and flightly feel in the humming. Your 3 years under Epsilon Indy Scarecrow were testing. What kind of testing? The kind of testing that never relents. That was a euphemism about the living Venus, the kind of things grandmothers say as they tuck children into bed during bucking winds. Your new posting, the Scarecrow finally said. Is it good? Upon her transfer back to Venus, Barré had been installed at the head of a new division in the Future Threats branch of the analysis sector. It feels like a desk job. The second lens whirred and zoomed onto Barré. The mouth on the metal cloth had been painted uneven and expressionless, but the humming and the higher register of the voice gave it some illusory implied motion. Another Scarecrow trick of psychology. You've been given policy influence here and the ability to task units in the field, the Scarecrow said. The humming tune, on some other channel, slipped its way under the AI's answer. Lonely, lost. We know we want you, but our wanting only goes so far. At some point, you need to want it. What do you hope I'll want? A broader canvas for your talents. And what does that mean? Sometimes meanings have to come when they're ready, the gravelly voice said. Learn more and we'll talk again. That's the opening chapter of Quantum War.
And that is Quantum War, and it's coming out at 2012. People have noticed that we are out of time. Usually we do the post game separately after the show, but the last few months we've rolled that in and kept the stream going until the very end. Thank you for the reading. I would propose that we do that today and don't just do the exclusive VIP because there's people watching on the various platforms. Now, the Quantum War starts with the Scarecrow, and we should have established who the Scarecrow is. As a matter of fact, as you were talking, a Scarecrow appeared in the audience, and his name is actually Scarecrow.
Oh,
Um,
sweet.
he looks like a scarecrow. But what are the scarecrows?
So the congregate are my big bad. They're sort of the empire, and they're basically if the Quebecois separated, founded Venus, and then Venus became this big imperial power with many star systems, and they're really into. They're very cautious about rebellion and people that might knock them down or whatever. And so they took their spies who are on the edge of death and they sort of upload their consciousness into basically AIs, sort of like these brains, these AI brains, but they're uploaded consciousnesses. But it's not a perfect upload. And then they give those AIs big weapons, armor, and everything else. And then they have these ageless spies who can work, the intelligence and protection of the congregate.
And the congregate is a patron nation, and there are several client nations. So this whole the whole political framework is also super interesting. As a former news director for political radio, that's also something. If you're into that kind of stuff, amazing job, Derek. How you're hinting at these things, and one feels like, oh, is he going to flesh it out a little bit later? And then you hint a little bit more, so you sprinkle it around, and that's really the stuff that I love. Uh, I think we could go. Let's go straight to the House of Sticks reading because we gotta cut today brutally at the bottom of the hour. I know I say it every time, but we today we really have to do it. and we're having an awesome time. And there's a lot of comments. So let's see. House of Sticks, please appear from underneath the ground, if you will, book stand. And now you have to stand up again, Derek.
Okay,
And
I'm getting better at this.
this
Wait,
is really
where?
the whole book club. Oh,
where
your mirror neurons. Speaking about neuroscience, there is research that suggests that if you work out in a virtual world like Second Life, you're actually you're losing a few pounds in the real world.
okay, I'm going to walk close here. Okay, you said you can move the thing so it's closer to
Oh yeah,
me?
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop here and say I did it.
It'll magically move. It'll magically move. People here
Wonderful.
in the chat are mentioning. Let me read a few things. Schrodinger's books. Nobody knows if they're read or not. That's a good one. It's impossible to say. And somebody mentioned a book earlier by an author that is on my radar because I think he was in Berlin together with Jonathan Lethem. Katsuo Ishiguro. Latest novel is Clara and the Sun. Clara is a companion AI. She's solar powered and worships the sun. She comes to believe pollution will harm the sun, and so she acts out disastrously. This feels like a similar theme to the Puppet Bible, where the AI's perspective leads to odd conclusions of logic. The puppets are not AIs. The AI is Saint Matthew. Saint Matthew is also a little crazy um, because he just feels that he's really he feels he is the apostle, literally. That's the flaw in his programming, but he's very benevolent and a good team player. Then people mentioned the Quantum Thief. What's the fourth book going to be called in the quantum? Let's wrap the quantum thing after the
Quantum Temple.
quantum temple. Okay. Now let's move to House of Sticks. What is House of Sticks all about? It's the
So
prequel.
it's not like they can be read utterly independently because the events of one don't affect the events of the other. Basically, I'm fascinated by the congregate and this life on Venus. And so I wanted to write a couple of books that basically talked about what were the Venusians like before they became the congregate. And so that 2-book series, the duology, is going to be about what the congregate is like, what it's like living in the clouds, and how they eventually become, how they eventually embark on this pathway that will take them to being this interstellar empire.
The congregate and the Venusians are, you use them
Same thing.
interchangeably. Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. The Venusian congregate is what I call it.
hmm So they started out on Venus around
Mm-hmm.
there. Okay, so we're reading from chapter 2.
Yep.
Anything else to set up here?
No, I mean, this is just the first scene where we encounter Mount, who is one of the key players, one of the key personalities in this book. And so this is her first scene. And it'll explain that, they're in the clouds of Venus in a sort of dirigible sort of habitat.
And now if this is, sorry, one more thing. So this is
Mm-hmm.
250 years before the quantum magician.
Yeah.
So this is around 2020 something.
2260 or something. Yeah, 2250.
Okay. Just did I get my timeline correct? But since eternalism doesn't really matter what time it is.
That's right.
Please go ahead.
Okay. So chapter 2 of House of Sticks. Mount rose quietly from the hammock and shivered in the cold. Emile said he'd fixed the heat circulation system, but it was obviously buggered up again. She pulled the curtain aside to peek at the brightness. The Kozapskal des Vents floated 5 kilometers above marbled ochre clouds extending in every direction out to a horizon that revealed the planetary curve. The bulk of the dirigible's buoyancy tank blocked the direct sunlight that would have made the 3-room habitat too hot. The clouds were deceptively calm, frozen in the moment of a roiling turn, a reaching finger, a changing color. Their deliberateness suggested lethargy, but Venus was anything but slothful. She hid her tantrums with the highest hazes and clouds. Kalis, I thought you said we could sleep in, Noel said, grumbling from the hammock. Sorry, Mouth said, I couldn't sleep. Now I can't sleep. Mouth shivered and padded back to the hammock and slipped under the covers. Don't be like that, she said. I'm sorry. Noelle huffed and turned her naked back to her. Mount spooned close, but Noel shrugged away the contact, leaving Mount to stare in frustration. Why do you care? Mount said. You don't even want to go. It doesn't matter whether I want to go or not, Noel grumbled. You should go with me. You hate those people. So do I. Do you want us to stay in all the time? What would Delia say if she saw us there? Mount asked. You just want to make her jealous. Screw off. Gossip gets to my ears just like anyone else's. You should know what they say about you then, Noel said. I know what they say about me, and I know what they invent about me when they get bored. The ice bitch, they say, Noel said, sneering. Mount laughed. That's what you think I care about? Noel threw off the covers onto Mount and hopped from the hammock. Mount enjoyed the view. Where her own skin was cloud pale, Noel came by hers from Haitian Quebecois ancestors. Mount's liaisons with Noel were shallow and brief whenever Noel and Delia were on the outs, but Mount hoped that something more might be possible. Until one of them blew up about something, like now. Noel finished pissing loudly in the head, took a paste pack from the cooler, and then started putting on her survival suit. Mount came off the hammock. Let me help you. Noel swatted her hands away. I'll psycho myself out. Fine, do that, Mount said. She flopped back into the hammock and covered herself against the cold. Noel left in a huff, making sure to kick and slam things on the way to the airlock. After a time, the Kozapskal des Vents quieted, but for the creaking of age and the snaps of pressure changes as the slow leaks all over the habitat triggered compressed air to replenish the atmosphere. Her brother hadn't been here when she'd arrived, drunk with Noel, and she didn't hear anything now. It was just the two of them up here, 65 kilometers above the surface of Venus, living in a piece of crap habitat she was embarrassed to show Noel. The Kozapskal des Vents was in some ways better than the Kozapskal des Profondeurs, where her father lived with two of her brothers and her sister's son. Mount floated in the speeding winds of the high atmosphere, flying over the outspread fields of heaven. The bitterly cold, sunlit heights had only thin, ghostly turbulences, and the acidic spite of Venus had to struggle to reach them here. She sometimes succeeded, but not like down home. The spots and ridges of red acid scars on her hands and arms and neck attested to that. Still, she missed the depths, her family, the sweltering heat of their habitat, the struggle to pit her cunning against Venus to stay alive and scrape some subsistence from the deep clouds. And if she'd been with her family in the Kozapskal des Profondeurs, she wouldn't be fighting with her words, making enemies and no friends. But she wouldn't have Noel either, not even for a night. She would be lonely in different ways. Pascal might be lonely. He was 16 now and stuck with a cranky old man, a child nephew, and an adoring brother. Pascal was smart, funny, and good-looking. He needed company his own age, and given how poorly Emile had been doing here, maybe they ought to switch. Her father and Emile could try and make up, even though that was a long shot, and she could look after Pascal. She had other people to take care of too. She had two messages on her pad from families in the depths. Réal Chartier's family needed their insulin supply increased. The med computer said Réal's insulin dose was too low, but Central Supply didn't want to increase it without a doctor's say-so, and the doctors were all waitlisted. The Chartiers had given Mount the proxy vote in l'Assemblée because she could often persuade the ration managers. The Cousin family at 54th Rang had gotten their oxygen ration late last time and only a half ration this time. They borrowed from other deep families now, but Mount knew what was happening. Oxygen supplies were low for everyone. A hiss sounded. She rolled out of the hammock and ran for the source. Near the back of the gondola, at the airlock to the engines, a seal hissed. Kalis, she said. I'll stop there.
And that's Derek Künsken reading from the House of Sticks. Wonderful, Derek. This is really amazing. And I haven't, Rebellion sent me this book. I can only read 3 books per week. I know people go like, "What? Are you kidding me? I read 1 book per year." I'm not trying to brag, but I really wanted to dive in this as well because on the back blurb it says that you are addressing issues of disability. And when I was reading the Quantum Magician, this comes to mind. I mean, I work a lot with folks with disabilities through my documentary work, and uh, it the first read of the Quantum Magician and genetically modified people, it reminded me of an author that I profiled in the last documentary. She writes a lot about disabilities. I mean, could we look at genetically modified people as disabled people? What's the connection here?
I don't know. I think disability and ableism are complicated concepts, and I do not say that I have, the last word or even the first word on it. Um, it's obvious that in the quantum books, there are people who've been engineered, and there are things that they got on purpose, but there are sort of unintentional consequences. And that I don't know whether you'd want to classify that as a disability or not. I think one of the reasons why people may have said that disability featured in the House of Sticks is because um, Malth's brother, her eldest brother, has Down syndrome. And 28 years earlier, before the story started, the Venusian colony did not have many resources. And when they found out that Malth's mother was pregnant with a Down syndrome child, they said, just, abort the child. And for various reasons, the parents said they wanted to have the child. And then the communities, the doctors said, well, then this child will never have any medical resources because you shouldn't be, having this child who has a disability. And so that's what ended up causing the Daquillon family to go live within the clouds, in the deeper clouds, and basically live off the land. And there were other people who chose to do that too. But that character in the book is very important and has important things to do, and is a character who grows and has a role in the family as well, despite working against certain disadvantages. And so that's why that's there. Rather than any genetic engineering that's happening in this book, which is not really a factor.
Mhm. Super fascinating. We're gonna wrap it tight. If there's any questions here on the floor, please put them in now. We have only 8 minutes left. This goes like a whirlwind, like any show. I mean, would you recommend people start with the Quantum series or with the House of Sticks right now? If you're the bookseller here, I'm coming in like
I think
I
they're stylistically different. I
yeah.
think House of Sticks is definitely a story about family that's happening in a science fiction environment. And it's much closer to what we're living right now. And it's about poverty, and it's about community, and the ways communities don't work and the ways families don't work. Um, the Quantum Magician is definitely unabashedly, space opera. It is space adventure, and it's high octane, and it has different, it has a different feel. And so it depends on what people are looking for. If they're looking for science fiction involving family and stuff, then that's definitely the House of Sticks sort of thing. And I think if you're looking for something a lot more like The Sting or Ocean's 11, then the Quantum books are your thing.
Derek, there I thought you had a backup as a bookseller. I'm very disappointed because I was expecting you to say, "Hey, Downton Abbey in space." If that's your thing, there you go. um, Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, what can I say, folks? Pick up these books. Either one of them, you will not you will not be disappointed. Elfbiter's making some good comments here. It's a lot of great comments. My very last question, because Shyla, who is doing research for the show, she found out that you're big in China, and of course I noticed that my hero Xijing um, Liu
Yeah.
from the Three Body Problem actually it has a blurb here on your book, and that's absolutely amazing. I was between reading the Three Body Problem trilogy for the fourth time or your book, and so that went out. But real quick, how did you get big in China? Was it this kind of a coincidence?
The kind of science fiction that they look for in China is hard science fiction that's very science based. And they're looking for relatively, adventure or uplifty sort of stuff, fun stuff. And so they started picking up a lot of my short fiction that had been published in Analog or Asimov's, and they'd been publishing it. And, their circulation is like 40 or 50,000 of those translated magazines, but then it turns into like 100,000 people read it. And in 2017, I was invited to go to China as a guest of honor at a convention And the programming, and this was before I even had a book out. And the programming that they gave me was, they said, we gave you one program item. It's that we'd like you to interview Liu Cixin on stage for 45 minutes. And I'm like, you're kidding.
Wow.
And so
Oh my God.
that was it. I was in front of the TV cameras. They had like an auditorium full, and there I was with Liu Cixin, and we were interviewing, and with translation happening simultaneously in earpieces. And during that interview, he said, "Oh, I've read your work. I really like it." And I'm like, "What?" And so later on, we have the same publisher in China. And so when The Quantum Magician was coming out, I said, could we get a blurb from Liu Cixin? Because he had read The Quantum Magician as a serial. And so my publisher got a line from him, and then they translated it into English for me. And then we put it on the English edition.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of those things in life that you don't even know is a possible bonus. And then all of a sudden it's incredible. Yeah.
I wonder if that was determined. If you had gone to military school, you would have, and then maybe, would have met I don't know. Uh, I gotta wrap things up. This was absolutely amazing. People know the drill. Please put what you're reading either here in local chat, and Derek, you can do the same. What are you reading right now? Put it in local chat, or put it on the book trailer. Shiloh will put the URL for the YouTube book trailer. The Second Life Book Club is every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. We do an hour and a half, usually an hour stream plus 30-minute post game. Now we're wrapping it all together so that the Linden Labbers, before the Linden Labbers are complaining that the shows are too long. The show is produced by Isabel Sharon, Shiloh the Super Gecko, and myself, location manager, master builder Ruby, but with big help of Isabel today as well. Uh, Unbelievable work. Again, of course, this place will stick around. You can come here anytime. We have about 300 people walk through the archipelago and checking out authors every day. The avatars are made by Ruby. Research is by Shyla. Special thanks Marianne, Theanine, Brett Patch from Linden Lab, AJ McDowell, and of course Arthur and Schwartzman. And we have a lot of sponsors, meaning we use their wares, their products. There are Second Life virtual goods and services, and you can find them all over the island. Please check it out and check out their stuff for more information. And if we get around to it, we'll put a showcase on island number 3. We have a calendar, we have Discord, we have Flickr. They're on the sandwich board scattered around the islands. Please take lots of photos, put it on the Flickr, slbookclub@draxtor.com. You can recommend authors or just message Jared the bot at what is his name? Yeah, Jared Bot is his avatar name. Don't forget to tip our volunteer staff. There is a tip jar. I don't know where the tip jar is. I don't see it. Oh, it's here in the back. In the back underneath the blue self-pollinating tree is the tip jar. And yeah, please do spread the word about the Second Life Book Club in world or out of world. And we will see you soon. As a matter of fact, next Wednesday, where Nima Shaw will be here. And Nima Shaw wrote a book called Kololo Hill, a fascinating book about her. It's not about, but it's based on her own family history of Indians living in Uganda and then moving out. I don't want to get too much into it. It's an amazing book, and we will hopefully come up with some really cool ambience and place to welcome Nima. Interestingly enough, she also requested a astronaut avatar, uh, which bumped me out because I don't want to have 2 astronauts, you know, in consecutive weeks. People go like, "What? Everybody has an astronaut suit?" No, it's all about it's all about freedom, and that is next week, right here on the Second Life Book Club.